to another episode of the Steer Podcast. Please welcome your host, Chris McGee, as we educate today's security and law enforcement professionals for tomorrow's challenges.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Sphere Podcast. Episode number 5 coming your way now. I'm excited for today. Today's going to be a great show. We have a great guest on hand. Before I get to him, I want to cover a little bit about the topic we're going to be discussing and what's going on in our world. And today's subject is going to be active shooter situations. Now, we just had the tragedy down in South Carolina, and we've had many incidents and tragedies throughout our country over the past 10 years. And active shooters are not a new thing. They've been going on for a long time. And we need to address it head on. We need to hear the opinions of experts who have studied the situations and who have come up and devised plans that will help mitigate the losses that are attributed to active shooter situations. And who better to have than Chris Grolnick? Chris Grolnick from ActiveShooterExpert.com. That's ActiveShooterExpert.com. He is truly the leading expert on active shooter situations. He is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He's worked in law enforcement, and he's been involved with 2 active shooter situations. And that's more than I think anybody really in the industry can say they've been involved with that actually provides knowledge with it. And he is a very kind-hearted man who is willing to provide his knowledge for others to learn so that they can save lives and change the industry as a whole. And it's really our pleasure to have him on the show. So without any further ado, please welcome Chris Grolnick. Welcome to the show, Chris. It's a pleasure to have you on. And just for our listeners, if you could give them a little bit more background information on you, that would be awesome.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me today. My name is Chris Grolnick. I currently have the moniker bestowed on me from media such as yourself as the active shooter expert for America, but it actually broadens out a little bit more than that. I'm internationally recognized as one of the only people to be involved in 2 separate active shooter incidents domestically. I realize wartime is a little bit different. However, in the middle on U.S. soil during a shots fired scenario, I've been involved in 2. One is a police officer, which I am retired from now, and the second was as a husband and father on vacation with my wife and daughter. We were in a rental car and basically looked out the window and there was an active shooter in progress. And while we got to observe what was going on, I took the opportunity to translate that into a public safety message, if you will, of how to react and how to respond during a critical incident for the average person.
Yeah, and that brings in a good topic to start off our discussion with, and that is the difference of an active shooter event and an actual terrorist attack, and what a critical incident is, and those 2 subjects.
Well, a lot of people get those 2 confused or maybe skewed because they traditionally blend together, right? So an active shooter incident, you have to look at the 4 corners of an active shooter as if you were looking inside a box. You have the location, you have the people inside the location, you have the active shooter themselves, and then you have the police response. Now, the location is going to have some type of security plan, hopefully, right? They're going to have some type of training, prevention, mitigation plans in place for something, right? Maybe
Absolutely.
It's a worker in distress, or maybe it's domestic, whatever. Few train for the unthinkable, like an active shooter. And the people inside are going to be relied upon to what we call rise to the occasion. And we have so many studies that have been done by the United States military and government, to include the FBI, that people do not rise to the occasion. And I'm talking about even educational studies from very famous schools. They don't rise to the occasion. They rise to the level of training they have to survive such incidents. And then what the people inside believe, which is the national philosophy, is, and it's what's being preached to us daily, the police are going to respond to an active shooter incident. And this correlates directly to your question. An active shooter incident traditionally is over in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So they end from 0 to 7 minutes, they're over on a historic national average, and that's from 2014 to 2015. It takes police 17 minutes. It used to be 14, but now it's 17 minutes national average to respond to an active shooter before they actually confront either a deceased shooter or a shooter on the run or a shooter who's giving up, which is very unlikely.
Yeah.
So an active shooter, although it causes the feeling of a terroristic event, their mission is simply to cause havoc, to right some perceived wrong against themselves, whereas a terrorism event is usually conducted to achieve a religious, ideological, or political view, or they're motivated from those three areas. So those are, I know it's a long answer, but the specific difference is an active shooter wants to right a perceived wrong, and there's no profile. They're 5-year-old girls, they're 93-year-old men. They've been happening since the late 1700s. They're not a new phenomenon. It's an event where somebody gets upset and does something. The exact same thing is, on a little bit worse scale, but the exact same thing is if a driver was disgruntled and used his car to drive through a cafe.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. I think, when you look at the news and how they start reporting on these incidents, the one that just happened in South Carolina, and you always at the beginning hear, is this a terrorist attack or is this an active shooter incident? And I think that when you get a good definition out there, it helps to draw those lines, and the responses are different.
Yes, sir. We were called during the South Carolina tragedy, and quickly were able to disseminate. There's no easy way to describe it, so I won't say simply, but I'll say tragically, it was an active shooter event, but thankfully, it wasn't an act of terror.
Yeah.
So you can bestow any nameplate on it you like. At the end of the day, 9 people lost their lives. A 5-year-old's going to be traumatized for the rest of her life. There's a young man in prison that probably, deserves to be there, if not worse. And, there's 9 families. But, what the state of South Carolina is doing is, striking. It's worthy, very, awe-inspiring, if you will.
Yeah, the way they react. And that kind of the difference between an active shooter incident and a terrorist attack kind of brings up the idea of what critical incidents and what makes them so critical, and at what levels are you going to have people responding. And can you just clarify that a little bit?
Sure. So a critical incident is anything that stretches the abilities of the normal capacity for like a municipality or a township, a county, or even a state or government, or even the entire nation. So if we look at a shooting from a historical perspective, let's just use the LAX one, the Los Angeles International Airport one, because it gives great detail for perspective of time. The shooter was on a rampage for 12 minutes, first of all. Although there's all sorts of armed TSA agents there, nobody responded to the shooter themselves or engaged them for up to 40-something minutes. I think it's 42 if memory serves.
Wow.
Now, an airport has all the security in place that you could think of that would mitigate that type of incident if you were to fathom that. And yet it's not that it failed because they had just gone through training the week prior. It's not that their program failed. It's they didn't take into account the people inside, and that's the people that we talk about. That's what, ActiveShooterExpert.com is all about. That's why we invented the website. It is for, we have free training videos on there and free resources. We're not just a clearinghouse that we want to be hired to do bids on security assessments and safety and training, which we do because we have to, make a living and keep the bills paid. But we are so committed to the ideals of security on a grander scale. And getting back to what stretches those means, how would that response look? Well, LAX has a police department and a fire department. Both of them were exhausted beyond their normal capacity. Then they had a TSA, a government entity inside with U.S. Customs, Immigration, Border Enforcement. They were stretched to their capacity. They called in the Los Angeles Police Department. They were stretched to their capacity because now they're taking units away from their sectors and beats, and nobody can answer those 911 calls. Yeah. So now you have to reach into neighboring communities and ask for help to cover the cities while the city's responding to the airport. Therefore, that's a classic definition of a critical incident.
Yeah, it's kind of like a slinky effect, how everybody has to move over and help the others. And
exactly.
And this all comes through studying. And one of the major questions in my mind that came up when kind of trying to grasp the techniques and procedures that you're going to use in an active shooter situation is, do you study the why or the how of how someone perpetrates an active shooter incident more?
As far as I go personally, I told you the news media bestowed this moniker, active shooter expert. I was a little bit embarrassed about it at first. I then embraced it because I thought we'd be able to reach out and help. I call it my wife and daughter factor. If my wife and daughter feel comfortable, then I know that, and I feel comfortable with their safety. I know, other Americans can. Yeah. And not just Americans, but other people. And when I study these events, I've got a postgraduate degree, and I wrote my thesis on the phenomena of the active shooter and mass murderers. And what I focus on is the event itself. And if we can digress to the box theory of looking into from the lens of the top of a box and see the four corners of an event, I try to look at all four corners, and I try to come up with what happened at which point of the corner that allowed this to either be mitigated successfully. And when I say successfully, it means, at best case scenario, the shooter was incapacitated, stopped, killed, whatever, like no other victims. That would be the best case scenario. If, out of a bad situation. Obviously, the best scenario is never happening. But if these things were to kick off, the best case scenario is somebody stops these people. And if I could give you a brief example.
Absolutely.
I hate to say that high schools are less prone to active shooters because historically that would be an ignorant statement. However, what we're seeing studying these is high schools are filled with athletes, strong, young, aggressive young men with testosterone flowing. And when they see something, they don't know they're not invincible. And they try to embark on whoever's doing something bad by, tackling them. And there's a phenomenon out there. I wrote a long paper on it called Fight, Flight, or Freeze. It got, I say infamous, other people say famous, but it became a really good white paper, not because I authored it, but I co-authored it, but because it has some really interesting concepts and tools in there. And people are either going to fight or, we know about fight or flight. We've heard about it our whole life. Yeah. But what I call it is the forgotten F, the freeze factor. It's when people are in awe and they're watching, like the other shooting in Colorado in 2014 at the school 14 miles away from Columbine. An active shooter, a kid walked up at lunchtime because his prom date broke up with him and, shot a few students. Well, people just got stuck. They didn't know what to do. He was finally tackled and taken down. But that's what you hope to see, and that's what these other kids that are thinking of doing these types of things, that where parents don't interfere or intervene, and where the system breaks down, and these kids try to go do these things. They're less likely to commit it in a place that has people that would want to stop them than they are in, say, a place that doesn't have anybody that's equipped to stop them. For instance, school resource officers, people, gun-free zones, etc.
Yeah, and I don't. You probably read it, but Lieutenant Colonel Grossman with the warrior mindset kind of goes into that freeze aspect of the adrenaline in the situation getting a hold of you and making you freeze and not reacting the way you're supposed to, and doing that through training. But you're saying is that the testosterone, and I've had that before, and that's why most people that join the military are 18 years old, is because they feel like they want to fight and do things like that. And you're saying that phenomenon is based around that, and that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, that's just, and like I said, I don't say that as an expert opinion. I say that from, taking all this information and digesting it and regurgitating it from a educated basis of, I've studied these things ad nauseum, and, there's more truth to that phrase than anything. It's because some of these are just, it's very difficult to study school shootings and children that do horrible things. Yeah. And there's an expert out there that works with Colonel Grossman, Dr. Grossman, that in the Bulletproof Mind that he goes around the country and teaches, which I've been to a couple of his seminars, and I've spoken to Dave several times. There's a guy named Phil Chalmers who's known as the leading juvenile homicide expert. He has interviewed nearly every surviving juvenile that's done a horrific act and has written books on the phenomena. And he's one of our strategic partners. So he is not only the authority on juvenile behavior, but someone I turn to when it comes to, school shootings. And I'm looking for a little bit of information to study. Absolutely. Attacking your question head on, what do I study, the shooter or the incident? I try to look at what happened leading up to the shooter, going, to the extreme. And so many people dismiss that as, oh, they're just crazy. The fact is some of them are so calculated, they're genius. Yeah. And it's not genius what they do. To them it is, but to us it's horrific. But you cannot dismiss these people as just crazy. That's the first mistake we make. Yeah. The second thing is I look at the location. Why the location? Why is it for military minds, we can easily discern, is it a soft target or a hard target? Yeah. Is it a target that is like a pet store that you could go into and there's nobody except, a couple cats in a cage? Or is it a, federal corrections facility that you can't get in or out of? Yeah. Unless you're in New York, I guess, but that's a little joke.
Thanks. So, and through those studies, you've come up with this principle of react, escape, and survive. And the Department of Homeland Security has come up with their own one, which is run, hide, and fight. And I know that you created that in mind with the two. And I was just wondering how they kind of worked in conjunction together.
Awesome question. So I deliberately, you and I spoke before this interview, so it's full disclosure. Yeah. But on my full disclosure part, I withheld discussing this part with you on purpose because it's always best when aired. I've spoken about this on CNN before. In 2000, because CNN uncovered this. In 2007, the city of Houston came to our one of our seminars that I was teaching as a police officer. I was a lead firearms and tactics instructor, and I came up with an idea that we needed to teach our court systems what to do in case someone goes crazy, because we were watching our city ramp up with several different scenarios happening, and I wouldn't say a prophecy. It was more of a reality that something is wrong. We need to look at addressing it. So I came up with this react, escape, survive idea that we could start teaching as an active shooter prevention methodology. And the city of Houston borrowed my PowerPoint. A couple years later, got DHS funding and turned it into run, hide, fight, because they thought the words were a little less aggressive for the human factor of these type of awful incidents. And when I read it, I was not upset. I appreciated that my message got out there because I think my name's somewhere in the credits, but at least on some of them. I know it's not on others, but what I did was I was upset enough that I wanted React, Escape, Survive to get out there so much because those are the three things that are factual. That is, run, hide, and fight is simplistic. What you need is something that's factually based, sound in mind, and, a philosophy of training that everyone has gone through, from my 14-year-old daughter to Delta Force, training for a hostage rescue. You have to know what those types of things are. So I went out and I got some experts like Dr. Morgan Banks, who's a full bird colonel, did the same thing Lieutenant Colonel Grossman did. In fact, I think they worked in PSYOPs together, but Colonel Banks is credited with some of the first psychological operation personnel within Special Forces, and he was one of the initial creators of SEER School, the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School. And he kind of developed the modern day Special Forces SEER, and he is known in the community to know more about the taking of human life and the survival than most people. So when he and I sat and we discussed the React, Escape, Survive principles, it was, the very first thing you need to do when something goes wrong is you need to react, and that's the human instinct. And that, goes back to the fight, flight, or the forgotten F, right? The freeze.
Yeah.
So we take that to the next level in the escape. What does escape mean? Doesn't mean you're breaking out of handcuffs. It means you got to escape an incident. You got to get out, just like a fire in a home. You tell your children, stop, drop, and roll, or you get out, right? Have a plan, and then survive. And we always say, you don't just have to do this for yourself. Put it in your mind that you're doing it for your other people. You're doing it for your family. You don't need to be a hero. You just need to save yourself. And if everybody has the same principles, everyone's going to mitigate the situation the same, and you'll have a number of survivors that's exponentially higher than a number of unfortunate, would-be victims.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody kind of has the grasp of run in a common sense, and he goes more in depth with the subject in run, hide, and fight. But with hide, there's one thing that kind of struck me as something that a common person wouldn't understand, and the difference between concealment and cover is huge in my mind. That someone would rather hide behind a desk than a brick wall that's enclosed. And can you just give a little brief description on the difference between cover and concealment?
Sure. The desk principle, and what they call that in schools now, is shelter in place, and we're trying to break that principle. Shelter in place is a great idea if you can lock the door with no windows, but if it's not, you want to be moving and moving on. You just need to use cover to get to where you're going. So to directly address your question, cover is going to actually stop, hopefully, or retract any type of object or projectile that's coming at you, whereas concealment just hides you. So the parallel I usually use is, if you look out a window and you see somebody ready to shoot, and you just pull down the blinds and you stay in the same spot, that window and those blinds are not going to stop the bullet from penetrating. You're just hidden. You're hiding yourself from the shooter, and they're going to have to adjust fire, wondering where you are, and it's kind of a guesstimate.
Yeah.
So that would be concealment. You're concealing yourself behind like blinds through a transparent window. Now, cover would be if that window was bullet resistant and the blinds were a second veil of steel. That would be a hardened thing, and you can close them, and now you are covered and concealed. So it gives you options. Brick walls that schools are usually made out of cinder block walls, where you can go down the hall. They are fantastic for cover, because you can move from position to position to evacuate, to escape, hence surviving.
Yeah.
Whereas people hiding under their desks conceal themselves, please don't. And I made a video about this called Super Status, and you can find it on our website, activeshooterexpert.com, under free training videos. There's no IP capturing, there's no registration, and there's no fees. It's just a free 26-minute documentary. And, well, it's not even a documentary, it's more of a docudrama of what to do. But we talk about React, Escape, Survive. We talk about the Latin word superstatus, which means survival. And we show you clips that were previously not available from the inside of Columbine. And we edited them so they are digestible by like 8-year-olds. But it shows kids just hiding under desks where the shooters had they don't care about people hiding under desks.
Yeah.
Those are their best targets, because they can make a bigger statement.
Yeah.
Whereas people hiding inside and behind doors with no windows and locking it, like at Virginia Tech, that's your best bet.
Yeah. And And then the next part is actually fighting. And I thought of that as another thing that people might misunderstand. And what are some of the steps you take when you're going to actually confront a person and fight them and take the fight to them, if that's your last step and that's what you need to do to survive? What kind of advice do you give someone who's about to enter that phase?
So it depends on where. It's a great question, and it depends on what level of training that we're talking about. Sometimes we train security forces personnel on this, because we're mostly psychology-based training for behavioral modification. And when we teach the second phase of it, taking the fight to the aggressor, we're usually talking police or military or security or armed security, whatever. They have more of a mindset of that they need to be the ones to stop something as grotesque as this. But if you look at the statistics, nothing is on their side. Not time, not distance, not speed. So who's going to be fighting? And it's going to be the actual first responder. And that first responder, and I always use my family because I don't want to offend anybody. So that first responder would be, let's say, my family inside an event. So I tell my family, look, if you're in a clothing store and somebody breaks out shooting and you got to get out and you see it, just if the bullets are coming from the right, move to the left and zigzag and get out, period. Know the store before you go in. And God forbid you can't get out and something happens and you're just stuck. Clothing racks, wallets, boxes, whatever it takes, you pick things up and you throw, because anybody that's hiding behind a gun committing one of these heinous acts cannot stand being confronted. Yeah. It's historically proven. Every data point that I have on every active shooter, except these people that are committing acts of terrorism, like the gentleman that was attacked, the police officers that were attacked in New York by we say, like I said, we dilute it to a simplistic crazy man, but it was a person with a mission with an axe that attacked 4 New York City police officers with an axe. He obviously was, in combat mode where he was going to hurt somebody. Now, he stopped once he was stopped because he did not want to be confronted. The same principle is for all these people that do these cowardly acts of active shooter, things. And I'm not trying to bait any people out there that are upset right now that say, ooh, he called me cowardly. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the act of the incident itself. And when I say my family, I mean my wife and daughter. If they can pick up a phone and smash a shooter in the head, then do it. And it gives them time. Anything that will buy you time to get out.
Yeah.
That's the fighting that we talk about.
And then kind of the last step to the whole entire process for a person caught in the middle of an active shooter event is the idea of when emergency response units show up on scene, what needs to happen for these people? Do they put their hands up in the air? How do you react when you're confronted by the good guys coming in to help you?
Okay, so there's 2 parts to this question, and few people realize there's 2 parts to this, because we all live in our own moment of time. There's so many Supreme Court cases regarding civilians and police and it's called the moment of time ruling. Well, it's based off of the psychology and dichotomy of what's happened to that point. So let's say let's say you're caught in a shooting and it happens, and you're a good guy, and the shooter has ended his own life because he's out of bullets or whatever happened. The shooter ended his own life, and you're trapped in there with this person for 10 minutes after the 7 minutes have gone by. So you are now 0 to 17 minutes without any help. Police show up. Your adrenaline is pumping. You're getting a little bit upset. You're going to be a little bit hysterical. You're not necessarily going to know how to react because there's, several other people determining, depending on the location you're at. If you're in an office building, there's that many people on your floor. If you're in a mall, there's that many people there shopping, depending on the sale size. They're all going to be reacting differently. Some are going to be hiding, crying in the corner. Some are going to be wanting to fight people that are around them because they don't know who else is an aggressor. And others are going to be trying to attack the person that's already deceased or whatever. Yeah. So when the police arrive, they are responding to a call with a man with a gun. Let me just say that if you are the guy that's inside a store and you have a concealed handgun license, and you pull your gun, and you shoot and kill an active shooter, and the police come in the store, and they respond to a call of a man with a gun, you're the person that's going to end up getting shot.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating don't carry a concealed handgun, and I'm not advocating to carry one. I'm advocating look at the historical perspective and look at it through the lens of the responding police officers. What would you do if you were a police officer responding to one of these events? And there's 2 case studies that I can bring to the table. One was a school locally here in Texas. They hit a panic button, and all these officers got notified, respond to this active shooter in progress. 17 officers from different agencies responded in plain clothes. 4 agencies responded from outside their jurisdiction to this active shooter. Now, mind you, it was a false alarm. Somebody just hit the wrong button. But you have 17 plainclothes officers. You have 5 officers in uniform, and the city isn't even on scene yet. And when the city shows up, they start drawing down on all these people with guns, and the people with the guns start drawing down on them because nobody knows who the shooter is. And that would be called, if God forbid something went wrong, that would have been called the blue on blue incident, where police shoot police. Those do happen. If you flip that over to the civilian side, there was a case study done by the Department of Homeland Security in Plano, Texas. They did iterations of 12 persons so they sent out a bulletin in Texas and said, if you have a concealed handgun license, would you like to participate in the study? So they took 360 respondents. They brought them into Plano, Texas, and used something called UTM, the Ultimate Training Munition, which is like Sims or paintball, but it's like paintball on steroids, if you will.
They hurt.
And right, yeah, they hurt bad, So we use them a lot because it teaches officers that just because you're shot doesn't mean you can't fight.
Yeah.
So what they did is they invited 360 people to this exercise. And they put them in a room right after the Charlie Hebdo shooting. And they said, look, we're going to pretend like you're drawing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad cartoon. And we're going to have 2 aggressors come into the room. And they're well-trained operators. So be expecting them. But let's just pretend all 12 of you are armed. Let's see if you could stop the shooter. So they're coming. You're drawing a picture that is, whatever you want to call it, provocative. And, you're not inviting trouble, but trouble's coming, and we're not going to tell you when it's coming, but just be ready. And we've not, they did every safety precaution perfectly. I mean, this operation was run flawlessly. It took all day to do. And, the people were in there from anywhere from like 30 seconds to 4 minutes before the aggressors came in. So, I mean, that's quite some time to prepare yourself. I'm going to draw my gun. I'm going to see the door. I'm going to start shooting. So they did this 12 iteration, these training intervals in 12 people iterations, and they did it 12 times. So that's 360 respondents that tried this. Out of the 360 people, 359 were shot. Okay, most would have been killed if it were a real event because they took what we call a mortal round, where it hit a mortal vital organ, like a headshot or the heart or, the groin area where they would have bled out. Only like 5 people, I don't remember the exact number, but 5 out of the 360 actually got to strike at least 1 or 2. Very few struck both terrorists, the would-be terrorists. I put quotes up under that. But only 2 struck the terrorists, and or both terrorists, I mean. And the one person that made it out was a female, and when interviewed at the end for the empirical data portion, she said, I remembered seeing a video, React, Escape, Survive. So I, instead of relying on my weapon, I knew I needed to get out. So I just zigzagged and got out the door and left, and she was unscathed. So I'm a little bit proud of that, obviously, because she used my video without without self-promoting it or promoting it even herself. It was inherent. We do behavioral modification through messaging, I say.
Yeah.
And these free videos are available for your family, my family, anybody's family that's listening. And we encourage you, take the 26 minutes, show it to your family, instill these principles, and understand a gun can save you if you're trained correctly. But I can tell you 55 incidents in this country that SWAT teams that have the highest level of training as we would know it to be, have run from gunfire instead of attacked gunfire.
Yeah.
And on the other side, and that sounds like I'm a SWAT team detractor, which I'm not. I'm a 7-year operator on a SWAT team. But I can also show you 300 incidents where, these brave heroes of SWAT ran in and, they're life-saving organizations and have taken rounds to save innocent people. So it's not that it's a mixed bag. It's that you just don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you could allow me 1 minute to just
Absolutely.
elaborate, think of it this way. I'll tell you a personal story that, I'm now obviously sharing nationally, but and beyond. When I was younger and I was in the Marine Corps for a long time, I used to do these things that, weird things. Like I remember doing an EOD interview and I got accepted. I just declined going to the program because I got picked up to become a Marine Corps drill instructor. So I had to weigh in on what I was going to do, but they do a test and it's called a claustrophobia test, and you have to be wrapped in a suit for like 12 hours and they try to sweat you out and all this stuff. Well, at that age, I was bulletproof, and if you would have asked me, I would have told you because I was too young to know any better. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'm not, they put me in tubes in this. They tried their best to make me as claustrophobic as possible because, you have to work in these silos.
Yeah.
So, no problem. Here I am 20 years later. I broke my shoulder, which I'm now paralyzed on my left arm. And I'm in this MRI tube and I start freaking out, not realizing I had become claustrophobic in my old age. So what I'm saying is we evolve as human beings and our brains tell us what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. And, these systems come up inside saying survive, survive, survive. And I digress to the very beginning of our interview. It's not that we're going to rise to the occasion. We're going to rise to the level of training that we have. So get the best training that you can. And if you don't agree that it's us, I'm good with that. But I know other experts out there that can help. And we refer business out all day long to other people. And it's not because we don't want to do it. It's that, one, we're busy. But two, we try to curb the appetite of the respondent with the server that could give them the best solution. So
Absolutely.
This isn't about, being narcissistic saying, hey, this is my program, this is what you need. It's more about if not us, someone else, but get something.
And last night I made sure my fiance sat down and watched that video, and it actually blew her mind, and she had no idea what she was doing. But after it, she left with knowledge that she works as a public defense lawyer in the court system, and you think about it, that could be a target. And I made her sat down and watch it, and she was thank you. She said that at the end of it for making me watch it, and I'm extending that thank you to you right now because it's great information.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that's that's what it's there for. And I'll tell you something funny. If you were to ask her this, you're going to be shocked. Dr. Morgan Banks helped with the behavioral modification, but you don't even know this. But in the video, we say it over 160 times: react, escape, survive, and we tell you these things: find the exits, know your exits, discover your avenues of escape. And we say this in civilian terminology, for lack of a better term, so that people like your fiance have a dream that night. They wake up the next day. If you were to ask her, hey, Debbie, tell me what you remember from that video, guaranteed she's going to tell you exit signs, floor plans, and avenues of egress.
Yeah.
Because that's the modification that we put in there. So that's good. That's great feedback.
Yeah, it's awesome. And just lastly, we like to end our shows with a unique question for our guests, and this one pertains to active shooter situations, and that is, besides your service weapon, if you are a law enforcement officer or security professional, what do you recommend for someone to have in preparation for an active shooter situation?
So we've done a lot of different training, what I call guesstimation training and reaction training. And what we did is we simply pulled out a stopwatch and we pulled out a brand new rookie officer, a 5-year officer, and a very experienced SWAT officer. We said, okay, go respond to this. And we used paintballs, so it wouldn't be too painful, but just to get the point across. And the responding officer, the rookie, responded very well, took a round, but was able to neutralize by pinning down the shooter into, getting them to say, please stop. The reality, though, is active shooters, it's imperative that you know this. Threats are meaningless, okay? It's imperative your listeners understand that.
Yeah.
You can't threaten an active shooter or shame an active shooter into giving up. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to escape. They're usually cowardly and don't want a confrontation, so they either end their own life or something else happens crazy, like the South Carolina guy took off and was captured. But, look at how he was captured during a traffic stop because a witness recognized his bowl cut.
Yeah.
So getting directly, the crazy question of what's best to use. For people listening that want to just protect themselves and their families, we invented an active shooter prevention kit that is mostly first aid derived. It's not about guns and knives like you would think. And it had some fire suppression tools in it. And I would suggest you go to Cold Fire Defense or go to activeshooterexpert.com and look under strategic partners. The very first person is named Justin Partridge. He's invented some fantastic kits, both for law enforcement and for everybody else. And they also work with the military and government organizations that, most don't even know exist. And, the tools that you would need is some type of fire suppression agent to get yourself through 17 minutes. Because if somebody starts fighting you with the Molotov cocktail and then, starts shooting, what we call that is the evolution of the active shooter. Don't think these people don't study other people's work and then go in and just, fire blindly, for lack of a better term. They do their own studying and they have their own plans and they write these things down. If they say they're going to kill somebody, take them at their word, go after them, and figure out how to stop them with the police. It's the adage of Homeland Security: see something, say something. It's the best little saying you can. That's a better weapon than anything you can have in a tool bag. However, if you are driving around and you have some type of kit in your car, a pistol, a couple extra magazines, and something that marks you like nothing else that says police, law enforcement, security, something that will not get you shot, but absolutely a pullover vest. Something that is, impenetrable by rifle rounds, because active shooters like rifles, they like handguns, they like shotguns. Shotguns, obviously bulletproof or resistant vests don't do too much because you have so many little bullets coming at you.
Yeah.
But a good kit, if you will, would have a handgun, many magazines, and either a rifle or a shotgun and some type of bullet-resistant material that you can put on. I would definitely shy away from a helmet, but I would 100% say whatever you do have, make sure it is clearly marked saying, I'm a good guy, here, and have an arrow with you. This is a bad guy.
Yeah.
So, shoot there, not here.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
I totally agree with the people who don't believe in concealed carry or carrying a weapon on them. If anything, the first aid, the amount of time it takes for someone to bleed out is a very short amount of time. And if you have something on you or in your office that you keep under your desk and you could take with you to counteract that, that's huge.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, when I just got done telling you the best thing you can do is throw a phone at somebody.
Yeah.
Well, if you can shoot somebody, that might not be too bad either.
Yeah, not at all. Well, what are you up to these days? I know you're very busy with the news and with the situation and tragedy that just happened in South Carolina, but where can people contact you and your websites, Twitter, all these different things?
So the easiest way to find us is #ActiveShooterExpert. And we own the domain activeshooterexpert.com. It'll take you directly to our company, CGPGMG, which is an innocuous name on purpose. However, we are working right now in building a consortium group, if you will, for the nation's leading experts in each one of their fields that relate to this. And we have 3 primary objectives. We have 1, we want to change the ideals that Americans think around the dinner table at night about security. Because when you ask the average kiddo or teenager or 22, 25-something, 30-something, when you go to the mall and you think of security, tell me what you think. And, Paul Blart comes out more than you would believe, right?
Yeah.
So we want to change that to make them understand, look, security is an onion, and there's these things inside malls that you don't know about, these, sensors or cameras or systems and monitoring centers, etc. So we want to change the fundamental ideas between the ideas that Americans have and people in the world have, because Kenya is a good mall shooting. It's good, that comes to mind. So it's more than a security guard. You can be your own security person, and we teach you how to do that. So we're building a consortium group, and that's like task number one, getting the message out. That's our priority, and that's what I'm up to the most these days. Part two is changing the way people understand that the police are not, it's not that they're bad people. It's just that they cannot be there for you when you want them immediately. And the old adage of there's never a cop around when you need them, I hate that adage because I used to be a police officer, and if people just take a ride along for one day, they would understand. Police run calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because people call them for the weirdest things. Sometimes emergencies, and others, it's cats in a tree.
Yeah.
But it's just like anywhere else. If somebody were to call you right now and say, Chris, I need you on your podcast here right now, an incident's happening, how long would it take you to get your equipment, get in a car and drive there? I'm going to bet it's going to be 20 minutes or more.
Yeah.
So police have, these little funny blue and red lights and a siren. That doesn't mean it teleports them. It just means, people generally get out of the way and they run red lights.
Yeah.
So they might have a 3 to 4 minute advantage, but that's it.
Yeah.
And lastly, we are getting into the domain, or I should say space, of social media. And what we're trying to do is be a private organization of these, superior patriots that are part of the consortium group, that are all experts at what they do, uniquely so, and get into the social media sphere of how people that want to do bad things are communicating on social media. Because my generation, I'm 45 years old, I don't understand how social media is used like an 18-year-old would.
Yeah.
And I can validate that with the FBI right now is doing studies on social media of how to, how kids are using social media, and they're exploiting it and turning it around to, okay, now we're going to think like a bad person. How would I use it to exploit it after I just learned from these youngsters? So if you think that our highest levels of law enforcement in this country are turning to the youth to learn how social media works, I'm not even sure Mark Zuckerberg could tell you how it works.
Yeah.
And an example of that is there's this thing out there called Snapchat, and I know I sound old and I'm dating myself when I say there's this thing, but there's, Snapchat. Facebook offered $1 billion to buy it, $1 billion with a B, a little bit over 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago. And Snapchat said, no, we're worth more than that. And a year ago, Facebook came back and said, we'll give you $2 billion with a B. And Snapchat continued to say no. Now that application continues to evolve, and they do fantastic things for kids. I mean, the kids love it. And I say kids loosely, 25 and under.
Yeah.
But with that said, we're trying to get into the industry of understanding how that works and how we might be able to prevent and mitigate the most horrific events that we believe are waiting around the corner right now, which is the evolution of active shooters. And we're talking about, unfortunately, people that want to do harm on the most grotesque scales, that just because we say active shooter doesn't mean it's just a gun. Think about anything that creates a critical incident. And 2 years ago, I wrote about an American creating a mall bombing incident, and we watched what happened in Kenya. And then what few people know is I encourage you to look on the web, look up Nova Scotia, Canada, Valentine's Day. There was a mall in Nova Scotia where an American citizen female went to. She had access to guns and explosives, and they stopped her before it happened. And if you take close note, you'll see that it was not advertised in the media because there was no fear that wanted to be driven in. And I am against fear mongering more so than I am about doing interviews. I refuse more interviews than I do. And the reason I picked yours is because I know, your host principles are, unique to our philosophy, that we don't fear monger, we educate.
Yeah.
And that's, the number one thing. So, those are the three things we're doing right now, and we're just about to start a national news campaign. We've been invited to several different networks, and we're excited to spread that message. And we encourage everyone to go to activeshooterexpert.com and read about our people. Don't read about me. Read about the people that we're associated with, and take the free training and use the free guides, and we're updating the site every day.
And one thing I would say when going to the website, make sure you click on these guys that are on the website, because they have links to their own material as well. And the reading continues. You could sit there for hours on hours and read about these guys and what they're offering and what they're trying to spread knowledge about. And it's great information. And thank you so much, Chris, for coming on. It was my pleasure, my honor to have you on. This is such great information. I know many people are going to look forward to listening to it and learning and staying safe in these situations.
Well, we're humbled to be on the show, and thank you, Chris. And anything you need in the future, let us know. And to the audience, I encourage you to remember, react, escape, survive. I did an interview on a television network that was in Washington, D.C. last week, and the co-host or actual anchor wrote me back on Twitter and said, I woke up this morning and was thinking react, escape, survive. I don't think any three words can be more powerful in my vernacular these days. And that was a very motivating message, and that's rewarding. That's how we get paid. That the payment is not dollars. The payment is knowing, you don't know what to stop, but it sure does feel good when you know other people are ready to understand.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. Anything you need or your callers need, they can reach me at activeshooterexpert.com. Or for the younger generation, use that hashtag ActiveShooterExpert.com or ActiveShooterExpert, and you can pretty much find me on Google that way. We don't do any search engine optimization. Everything is done because of the media. So we rely on people like you to spread the word. And again, thank you.
All right. Have a great day and rest of your week.
Hey, sir, you too. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Once again, I just want to thank Chris for coming on and sharing his expert knowledge with us. It's really valuable information that not only could help save other people's lives, but save our own lives in situations. How are we going to react when we are confronted with an active shooter situation? It really needs to be thought about, and I'm glad he came on, and I'm honored that he came on to share his experience and knowledge. But next week, we're going to continue this theme of active shooters. Nate McVicker from Guard 911 will be on to explain how his app helps in these situations. Have a good week, everybody.